She thought humiliation was part of the deal, but when he pointed to the floor, right next to the king-size bed covered in Italian silk sheets, and said in that cold voice that cut like glass, "That's where you sleep," she stood there in silence, with the wedding dress still clinging to her body, and made a decision that terrified him more than any enemy from the streets of Seoul ever could. You know that moment in your life when you realize you've accepted something you should never, under any circumstances, have accepted? That instant frozen in time where you feel every cell in your body screaming, "Get out of here," but your feet are nailed to the floor because you know there's no exit door. Well, that was her night. The night that Yuna Park, 24 years old, daughter of a bankrupt businessman who owed 3,000,000 won to the Korean mafia, became the wife of Kang Min-ho, the CEO of Empire Holdings, the man who controlled half of Gangnam's underworld, the ghost no one dared to challenge. But before I tell you what happened after that locked room, after that gaze colder than Seoul's winter, after that mahogany door slamming in her face with the mechanical click of the electronic lock, I need you to understand something very important. There was something in that room that no one noticed yet. Not him, with all his calculating intelligence and years building an empire in the shadows. Not the 12 mansion employees who lowered their eyes when she crossed the marble hallway for the first time as Mrs. Kang. Not the 300 guests at Seoul's most expensive wedding that year, who smiled falsely while toasting with champagne worth 50,000 won a bottle. Not even her father, who signed the marriage contract with trembling hands, selling his daughter as if selling property. Something invisible, something silent, something that would only be revealed exactly 3 weeks and 2 days later at a private dinner on the 47th floor of Empire Tower, where the silence would be more deafening than any scream of despair. A detail so small, so subtle, that everyone missed it. But it would change everything. Because you see, there's a difference between accepting humiliation and deciding how long you'll endure it, between lowering your head out of fear and lowering it because you're planning your next move. And Yuna was counting. Every second, every veiled insult, every contemptuous look from the staff, every night sleeping on that cold leather sofa in the corner of the room, while he occupied the bed like a king on his throne. She was counting everything. And when you count, when you record each humiliation with the precision of an accountant, you're not just surviving, you're building your case. Now I'll show you exactly how it all began, not on the wedding night, as you might be thinking, but 6 months earlier, on a rainy April afternoon, when Yuna's father received a call that would destroy her entire family in just 48 hours. Before continuing, tell me in the comments, where are you watching this story from? Because what comes next will affect you in ways you might not expect. And I need to know there are people with me on this journey. Yuna Park wasn't born to be sold. She was born on a spring afternoon in Seoul, daughter of Park Jin-woo, a mid-sized businessman who had a family construction company, 3 loyal employees, and the dream of one day building South Korea's most beautiful skyscraper. She grew up in comfortable apartments, studied at good schools, had friends who envied her long, straight hair, and at 24 worked as a graphic designer at a small but promising agency. She earned enough to pay her own bills. She had independence. She had plans. She had a normal life. The kind of life where the biggest drama is deciding which series to watch on the weekend, or whether it's worth spending money on expensive coffee before work. But normalcy, Yuna would learn, is a luxury that can evaporate in 48 hours. It was on a rainy Tuesday in April when everything collapsed. Yuna was at the office finishing a visual identity project for a restaurant when she received 7 consecutive calls from her younger brother, Jiho. He was 19, studying engineering, and never called during work hours. His voice trembled. "Yuna, come home, now." She caught the fastest subway she could, her heart pounding in her chest with that horrible feeling that something terrible was about to be revealed. Have you ever felt this? That chill down your spine, that irrational certainty that your life will never be the same? When Yuna opened the apartment door, she found her mother sitting on the sofa, her face swollen from crying. Her father was on the balcony, his back turned, smoking, and her father had quit smoking 5 years ago. Ji-ho pulled her into his room and closed the door. Dad took a loan from the wrong people, 3 million won. He tried to expand the company, invested in a project that failed, and now they're collecting. But it's not a bank, Yuna. She felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. Who? People connected to Kang Min-ho. Kang Min-ho. Even someone living in a bubble like Yuna knew that name. He was an urban legend of Gangnam. The Phantom CEO. The man who built a legitimate corporate empire on the outside, but everyone knew. Everyone controlled schemes in the shadows. Loan sharking, money laundering, violent collection. There were stories. Stories of businessmen who disappeared, of entire families who lost everything overnight, of people who dared to challenge him and woke up with their lives destroyed in ways so precise, so calculated, that it seemed like macabre art. How much time do we have? Yuna asked, her voice coming out firmer than she felt inside. 1 week, if we don't pay. They said they'll start with me. And it was at that exact moment, standing in her younger brother's cramped room, hearing her mother sobbing in the living room and her destroyed father smoking on the balcony, that Yuna understood the cruel rule of the world she lived in. When you're a woman, young and powerless, you don't have many cards in your hand, but you have one that men always want. 3 days later, Yuna was sitting in a conference room on the 52nd floor of Empire Tower. In front of her, a 47-page contract. On the other side of the table, Kang Min-ho. He wasn't what she expected. He wasn't a monster with scars and tattoos. He was tall, wore an impeccable Armani suit, was 34 years old and had features that could be on a magazine cover. But his eyes were absolute ice. The contract is simple, he said without looking at her, flipping through papers as if negotiating the purchase of an apartment. You marry me. You appear at public events when necessary. You keep up appearances. You don't interfere in my business. In return, your father's debt disappears, and your brother finishes college without being bothered. And if I refuse, he finally raised his eyes. And in that look, Yuna saw everything she needed to know. Your brother loses both kneecaps next Monday. Do you really want me to answer the rest? She signed. Not because she wanted to, not because she believed in fairy tales, but because when you're drowning, you don't choose the prettiest life preserver. You grab the one that's closest. But it was then that something broke this normalcy of signed paper and sealed fate. Something that neither she nor he could predict. The wedding took place on a cloudy Saturday in May. There was no kiss at the altar. There was no "you may kiss the bride," just signatures, flashes from photographers paid to record the event, and 300 guests who drank expensive champagne while whispering in corners about who this unknown girl was, who had become Mrs. Kang. Yuna wore a Vera Wang dress that cost more than she would earn in 3 years. Her hair pinned in an elegant bun. Impeccable makeup done by a professional team that treated her like a porcelain doll, pretty, fragile, decorative. She smiled for the cameras. She thanked empty compliments. She accepted hugs from strangers who pretended to know her. And throughout the entire ceremony, Kang Min-ho barely looked at her. He greeted investors. He shook hands with powerful men. He laughed at jokes she couldn't hear. She was an accessory, a piece on the board, a signed contract. But the real ceremony happened after, when the doors of the Kang mansion closed. The mansion was in Pyeongchang-dong, Seoul's most expensive neighborhood, hidden behind high walls and security cameras that monitored every inch of the perimeter. 3 floors of modern architecture, glass and concrete. Minimalist decoration that looked like something out of a design magazine, and as cold as a morgue. When Yuna crossed the main door for the first time as wife, 12 employees were lined up in the entrance hall. Maids, security guards, drivers, cook, all in impeccable uniforms, all with eyes fixed on the marble floor. None of them greeted her. None of them smiled. The message was clear. She wasn't the lady of this house. She was just another temporary employee. "Your suitcase has already been taken to your room," said the housekeeper, a middle-aged woman with a stone expression. "Second door on the right, on the second floor." Yuna looked at Minho, expecting, what? An explanation? A minimal gesture of civility? He was already climbing the staircase, typing something on his cell phone, completely indifferent. Yuna went up, alone. The room assigned to her was small, functional, without personality. A single bed, a closet, a window overlooking the inner garden. It looked like a guest room. It looked temporary, because it was. She collapsed on the bed, still dressed as a bride, the weight of the dress suffocating her, and for the first time in 3 weeks allowed herself to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just silent tears that streamed down and stained the white pillow. But the worst was still to come. It was almost midnight when Yuna heard knocking on the door. She got up, wiped her face, opened it. It was Minho. He didn't say anything. He just entered, looked around the room with that neutral expression she was beginning to hate, and then spoke. "You're going to sleep in my room." Yuna felt a shiver run down her spine. Not of hope, of fear. "I thought, don't think. The staff will find it strange if you sleep separately on the first night. Appearances, remember? That's what you signed." She followed him down the hallway to the master suite at the end of the floor. The door opened, revealing a room 3 times larger than hers. King-size bed, decoration in shades of gray and black, an entire glass wall overlooking illuminated Seoul at night. And that's when it happened. Minho locked the door behind them. He walked to the closet, took off his jacket, loosened his tie. Yuna stood in the middle of the room, her heart racing, her hands sweaty inside the dress still clinging to her body. "You can take off the dress. There's a robe in the bathroom," he said without looking at her. She didn't move. He finally turned, and there was something different in his look. Not desire, not affection. Control. "We're going to share this room to keep up appearances. But let me make one thing clear right now." He took 2 steps toward her. "You're going to sleep there." And he pointed, not to the bed, to the black leather sofa in the corner of the room next to the bookshelf he clearly never opened. "That's where you sleep." Yuna stood there, still dressed as a bride, looking at that sofa that looked more like a sentence. She could feel the humiliation burning her cheeks. She could feel the tears threatening to return. She could feel every cell in her body screaming for her to respond, scream, throw something in his face. But then she remembered. She remembered her brother, the debt, the signed contract. And she did something that surprised even herself. Yuna didn't say anything. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply walked to the bathroom, closed the door, took off the wedding dress with mechanical movements, put on the white robe that was hanging, and when she came out, she lay on the sofa without saying a word. Minho turned off the lights. The room plunged into darkness, and on the first night of marriage, Yuna Park slept on a cold sofa 3 meters from her husband, with the absolute certainty that there was no turning back. But what neither of them knew was that that night, that gesture of calculated humiliation, would be the exact moment when everything began to crumble for Kang Minho. Because there's a difference between breaking someone and awakening something inside that person that should never have been awakened. If you're feeling angry now, if you feel like screaming at the screen, don't leave. Because what happens in the next chapter will make you understand why that night was just the beginning. The first 7 days were a study in silence. Yuna woke up at 6 in the morning with a body aching from the leather sofa that seemed to have been designed for torture, not for sleeping. Minho had already left. She never saw him in the morning. Just the smell of his coffee still lingered in the air, and a dirty cup in the kitchen sink that the maid rushed to wash as soon as Yuna appeared. She had coffee alone at the dining table that seated 12 people. She spent her days wandering, the mansion like a ghost trying to understand the unwritten rules of that place, where she could sit, where she shouldn't enter, which staff actively avoided her and which just pretended she didn't exist. The housekeeper, Mrs. Choi, was 52 years old and had an exceptional talent for making Yuna feel invisible. When Yuna asked something, answers came in monosyllables. Yes, no, as you wish, Mrs. Kang. But the tone made it clear she wasn't the lady of anything. Minho came back late, always, after 11 at night. He entered the room without greeting, went straight to the bathroom, took a shower, and lay on the king-size bed as if Yuna wasn't there, curled up on the sofa, pretending to sleep. Some nights he stayed up late on his laptop, typing, answering calls in a low voice that she couldn't fully understand. But she caught loose words: transfer, guarantee, problem solved. Yuna learned not to ask questions. She learned that curiosity in that house was dangerous. But she also learned to observe. Music subtly increases. It was on the morning of the 8th day that something changed. Yuna came down for breakfast and found Minho still at home, sitting at the table, reading the newspaper. This never happened. She hesitated in the kitchen doorway. "Sit," he said without looking up from the newspaper. Yuna sat 3 chairs away from him. Silence. He turned the page, drank coffee, kept reading. She looked at the empty plate in front of her, not knowing if she should serve herself or wait. The rules changed constantly and she never knew which to follow. "There's a dinner tonight," Minho finally said, still without looking at her. "Important investors. You're coming with me. I don't have appropriate clothes for it. It's already been arranged. Stylist comes at 3. Don't be late." He folded the newspaper, got up, and before leaving stopped beside her chair. Yuna felt her entire body stiffen. "And Yuna?" She raised her eyes. He was looking directly at her for the first time in 8 days. And there was something in that look, not anger, not desire, but something she couldn't decipher. "Don't embarrass me." And he left. Yuna sat there alone at the giant table with that phrase echoing in her head. Don't embarrass me, as if she existed only to not tarnish his reputation, as if her only value was not to interfere. The dinner was at Gangnam's most expensive restaurant, a place with reservations 6 months in advance, where each dish cost the equivalent of an apartment's rent. Yuna wore a black Chanel dress, discreet jewelry, high heels that hurt her feet. The stylist had transformed her into a polished, impeccable, perfect version. A display doll. Minho led her through the restaurant with a firm hand, but not affectionate, on her back. They stopped in front of a table where 4 middle-aged men were already waiting, all in suits, all with that aura of power that wealthy people carry like perfume. "Gentlemen, this is my wife, Yuna." Polite. Smiles, formal greetings. Looks that assessed her from head to toe like someone assessing a new car. Yuna smiled. She thanked. She sat. And throughout the entire 6-course meal she noticed something disturbing. They spoke as if she wasn't there. Business, investments, mergers, acquisitions, politicians who could be bought, competitors who needed to be neutralized. Yuna cut the filet mignon into tiny pieces she could barely swallow, her stomach churning, and observed. She observed how Minho controlled the table with strategic silences and precise words. She observed how the powerful men subtly bowed to his will. She observed how one of the investors, a man named Mr. Wong, looked at her with a smile that made her skin crawl. "Your wife is charming, Minho. Where were you hiding this gem?" Minho didn't smile. She prefers discretion, clearly. "But tell me, Yuna." She raised her eyes, surprised to be directly addressed. "How did you meet our friend here? He's not exactly the romantic type." The entire table turned to her. Yuna felt panic rising in her throat. Minho didn't move, but she could feel the tension in his body next to hers. "Don't embarrass me." She wiped her lips with the napkin, drank a sip of water, and said with a voice that surprised even herself with its firmness, "We met through family business. He was pragmatic to the extreme." I appreciated the honesty. The men laughed. "Pragmatic. That's an elegant description." The tension dissipated. The Conversation returned to numbers and contracts. And for the first time since she had entered that mansion, Yuna felt something different from fear or humiliation. She felt power, small, fragile, but real. On the way back home, Minho drove in silence. Yuna looked out the window, Seoul's lights blurred by the glass, and waited. She waited for him to say something. Anything. Finally, he spoke. "You did well today." It wasn't a warm compliment. It wasn't accompanied by a smile. But it was the first acknowledgement that she existed beyond a contract. "Thank you," she responded quietly. Silence again. And then, almost as if speaking to himself, "You're smarter than I thought." Yuna didn't respond, but she stored that phrase like someone stores ammunition. Dramatic pause when they arrived home. Minho went straight to the office on the ground floor. He always did this when he returned from dinners like that. Yuna went up to the room, changed clothes, lay on the sofa, and for the first time in 8 days she didn't cry, because she realized something fundamental. Minho didn't expect her to be intelligent, and that was an advantage. But what Yuna didn't know yet was that Mr. Wong, the investor with the uncomfortable looks, had made a call as soon as he left the restaurant. A call to people who wanted to see Kang Minho destroyed. And her name, Yuna Park, had just entered a very dangerous list. If you've made it this far, you're already inside this story with me. And if you want to continue discovering what happens when Yuna stops being invisible, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter. Because what comes now is where everything starts to turn. Yuna woke up the next morning with the feeling that something was different. It wasn't anything concrete, just that weight in the air, that invisible tension you feel when a storm is about to fall, but the sky is still clear. She went down for breakfast and found the mansion in absolute silence. The staff moved like shadows, avoiding making noise. Mrs. Choi, who normally always had a neutral stone expression, seemed nervous. "Where is Mr. Kang?" Yuna asked in the office. He asked not to be interrupted. The office door on the ground floor was closed, but Yuna could hear his voice on the other side, low, controlled. But there was a tension there she had never noticed before. She didn't dare knock. It was only in the late afternoon, when Yuna was in the second-floor library flipping through a book she couldn't really read, that Minho appeared. He was in a dress shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked tired. For the first time, he looked human. "I need to talk to you." Yuna closed the book, her heart racing. They went down to the living room, that giant one with white sofas that no one ever used. Minho sat, indicated she should do the same. "Last night, at dinner," he began, "you attracted attention." Yuna felt her stomach sink. "Don't embarrass me." "I tried. It wasn't your fault," he interrupted her. And for the first time there was no coldness in his voice. There was something that seemed almost concern. "Mr. Wong, you noticed how he looked at you?" She nodded slowly. "He asked questions about you, about us, to the wrong people." "What kind of questions?" Minho leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, and for the first time since she had entered that house, he looked at her as if he was really seeing her. "Huang isn't just an investor. He has connections with the rival group, people who want to see me out of the game. And now, because of that dinner, they know you exist." Yuna felt her blood freeze. "What does that mean?" "It means you've become a piece on the board. And pieces can be used in various ways." She should have felt fear. She should have panicked. But instead, a different question rose to her throat. "Why are you telling me this?" Minho didn't answer immediately. He got up, walked to the huge window, overlooking the inner garden, and stood there, his back to her. "Because if something happens to you, I look weak. And I can't look weak." Of course, it wasn't about her. It never was. But then he continued, his voice lower, "And because you signed a contract, but you didn't sign up to die." Yuna was speechless. "Tomorrow you're going to start having an escort. 2 security guards. They'll be with you whenever you leave the mansion." "I barely leave the mansion. Now you will." She frowned. "You're going to start attending events with me. Dinners, galas, charity auctions. I need them to see you by my side." I need them to know you're not a vulnerability. And what am I then? Minho finally turned, and for the first time Yuna saw something different in his eyes. Not affection, not warmth, but recognition. You're my wife, and that, whether you like it or not, puts you at the center of a war you didn't even know existed. During the next 5 days, Yuna's life changed. Completely. From invisible, she became hyper-visible. 2 security guards, one named Min Jae and another named Taesung, began following her everywhere. When she went out to walk in the garden, they were 3 meters away. When she went to the city to choose clothes for events, they flanked the limousine. At first, she hated it. She felt like a prisoner with escorts. But then she realized, for the first time, the mansion staff treated her differently. Mrs. Choi no longer ignored her. She answered complete questions. She even offered tea without being asked. The maid stopped whispering when she passed. The driver greeted her by name. Because now she was no longer just the girl who had been bought. She was the girl Kang Minho was protecting. On Friday there was a charity gala at the Grand Hyatt. Yuna wore a red dress that the stylist swore would make her unforgettable, and she was right. When she entered the ballroom on Minho's arm, conversation stopped for 2 full seconds. Curious looks, disguised whispers. Women assessing the dress, the jewelry, the hair. And men assessing her. Minho guided her through the crowd with the same firm hand as always, but this time there was something different. He didn't let go of her once. He kept her by his side during all conversations. He introduced her to businessmen, socialites, even a high-ranking politician. My wife, Yuna. And each time he said that, it was like he was planting a flag in the ground. She's mine. Don't touch. It was in the middle of the night, when Yuna was getting a glass of champagne at the bar, that she felt a presence beside her. Mr. Wong. The viscous smile, the eyes roaming over her with a slowness that made her skin crawl. Mrs. Kang. What a pleasant surprise. She smiled politely, but every muscle in her body was tense. Mr. Wang, your husband is a lucky man. Although between us, he leaned closer, his voice too low, too intimate. I wonder if he really appreciates what he has. Yuna felt her blood boil. Before she could respond, a firm hand landed on her waist. Minho. Huang. His voice was cutting ice. Was my wife bothering you? The inversion was brilliant, sudden. Huang took a step back, hands raised in false surrender. Just being kind, Minho. You know how I am. I know exactly how you are. The 2 men stared at each other. 3 seconds that seemed eternal. Finally, Huang smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes, and walked away into the crowd. Minho didn't let go of Yuna's waist immediately. He waited until Huang completely disappeared from view, and then very quietly, just for her to hear, "Are you okay?" Yuna looked at him, surprised. "I am," he nodded, and for the first time, his hand lingered a second longer before letting go. On the way back home, neither of them spoke, but there was something different in the air of the car. Something that wasn't there before. When they arrived at the mansion, Minho didn't go straight to the office as he always did. He went up to the room with her. Yuna changed clothes in the bathroom, put on the robe, and when she came out, Minho was standing next to the sofa where she had been sleeping for 2 weeks, looking at it as if seeing it for the first time. "You don't need to sleep here." Yuna's heart stopped. "What?" "The bed is big enough. And you're going to break your spine on this piece of crap." It wasn't a romantic invitation. It wasn't accompanied by smiles or promises. But it was something. Yuna didn't move for 3 full seconds, and then, slowly, she walked to the other side of the king-size bed. She lay down, as far away from him as possible. Minho turned off the lights, and that night, for the first time in 15 days, Yuna slept in a real bed. 3 palms away from a man she still didn't know if he was her captor, or her only protection, in a world much more dangerous than she had imagined. And now I need to tell you what no one told me, what no one knew, not Yuna. Not Minho, not the security guards watching the mansion. Was that same night, in a dark room on the other side of Seoul, 3 men were planning how to use that girl in the red dress to destroy Kang Minho once and for all. Chapter 6. Transformation. During the next 3 weeks, Yuna learned things no school ever taught. She learned that power isn't just about who shouts loudest, but about who knows when to stay silent. She learned that there's an entire language being spoken in the spaces between words, in glances exchanged over wine glasses, in strategic pauses before an answer. She learned that in Kang Minho's world, weakness was a luxury that cost lives, and she learned by observing. At dinners that now happened 2-3 times a week, Yuna was no longer the silent doll at the end of the table. She paid attention to everything. How Minho deflected conversations when he didn't want to answer. How he used empty compliments to disarm dangerous people. How a simple "let's talk about this later" meant no. "And you can't force me." She observed the wives of other powerful men and women in their 40s, 50s, all with that armor of expensive jewelry and trained smiles. They had also learnt. Some still feigned innocence. Others had already given up the farce and negotiated power under the table with the same skill as their husbands. And Yuna realized something fundamental. She didn't want to become any of them. But she also couldn't continue being the girl who had signed that contract 3 months ago. That girl was dead, and in her place something new was growing. Something she didn't fully understand yet, but felt like a seed breaking through soil, slow, painful, inevitable. The nights in the room also changed. Minho still worked late on the laptop, but now, from time to time, he made loose comments about business, about problematic people, about decisions he needed to make. He didn't ask for her opinion. He didn't expect answers, but the simple act of speaking aloud in her presence meant something. It meant he no longer saw her as completely useless. One night he closed the laptop with a heavy sigh and said almost to himself, "Huang is planning something. I just don't know what yet." Yuna was lying down looking at the ceiling but turned her head toward him. "He tried to approach me again." Minho immediately tensed. "When?" "Yesterday. At the art auction." "You were talking to the curator." "He came up to me, asked if I was happy in the marriage." "And what did you say?" Yuna held his gaze in the dark. "I said happiness is too romantic a word to describe marriages like ours, but that I perfectly understood the value of loyalty, of silence." And then something rare happened. Minho smiled. It wasn't warm, it wasn't kind, but it was genuine. "You're learning fast. I have no choice. Everyone has a choice. You just chose to survive instead of drown." Yuna didn't respond, but she stored those words like someone stores a hidden weapon. In the following days, she began testing limits. She asked for access to Minho's office during the day when he wasn't home. He authorized it, but with one condition. She didn't touch anything, just observed. And observing was exactly what she needed. Yuna spent hours in that office with dark walls, sitting in the leather chair behind the desk where Minho commanded an empire. She looked at the documents he purposely left in view: contracts, financial reports, printed, facade. But underneath was a complex network of investments, shell companies, people who owed favors. And the more she understood, the more she realized a frightening truth. Minho wasn't the villain she had imagined. He was worse. He was the king of a game where villains and heroes didn't exist, only players and pieces. And she was beginning to understand the rules. It was on a rainy Thursday that everything changed again. Yuna was in the library when she heard raised voices downstairs. She went down slowly and found Minho in the entrance hall, talking to 2 men she had never seen. Both in suits, both with that dangerous energy of people accustomed to solving problems with violence. "She needs to leave the city," one of them was saying. "No." Minho's voice was steel. "They're planning something. We have information that I said no. Yuna went down 2 more steps. The 3 men turned. Minho saw her and something passed across his face. Irritation or perhaps concern, she couldn't tell. Go back to the room. What's happening? It's not your... If it's about me, it's my business. The 2 men exchanged glances. Minho took a deep breath, that controlled breath of someone holding back anger, and dismissed the security guards with a hand gesture. When they were alone, he finally spoke. Huang and his group are planning to kidnap you. The world seemed to tilt. What? Not to hurt you, to force me to negotiate, to make me look weak, to create a situation where I have to choose between you and my business. Yuna felt her legs go weak. She grabbed the railing. And what are you going to do? Minho climbed the steps until he was at the same height as her. And for the first time since she had entered that house, he touched her face, not with affection, but with firmness, like someone holding something valuable that could break. I'm going to make sure they never get close to you. Why? The question came out before she could stop it. Why do you care? I'm just a contract. You said so yourself. Minho was silent for a long moment, and then, with a voice so low she almost didn't hear, you stopped being just a contract the moment you looked Wang in the eyes, and didn't lower your head. Yuna's heart stopped. She wanted to ask what that meant. She wanted to understand if it was respect or possession, or something completely different. But before she could speak, Minho had already moved away. From now on, you don't leave the house without me. Understood? She nodded. Say you understood. I understood. He climbed the rest of the staircase and disappeared into the room. Yuna stood there, stopped halfway, her hand on her face where he had touched, and realized something terrible. She was no longer afraid of him. She was afraid of what she was beginning to feel. That night when they lay in the same bed with the abyss of 3 palms between them, Yuna couldn't sleep. She lay looking at the ceiling, listening to his breathing become slower, deeper, until she knew he had fallen asleep. And then, very quietly, like someone confessing to the dark, I didn't sign up to care about you. Silence. Just the rain beating against the window. But the price of understanding Tang Minho's world was higher than Yuna imagined. Because now she was no longer a victim. She was an accomplice. And there was no turning back. Chapter 7, Forbidden Romance. Internal conflict, the kidnapping threat changed everything. Minho no longer left the house without Yuna, and Yuna didn't leave the house without Minho. They became shadows of each other, present at every meeting, every meal, every moment of the day. The mansion, which before seemed too big, now seemed small, suffocating, as if the walls were slowly closing in, and with proximity came things neither of them expected. Small gestures that meant nothing, until they meant everything. Minho's hand on her shoulder when they passed through a door. The coffee he began bringing to the room every morning, without saying anything, just leaving the cup on the nightstand on her side. The way she adjusted his tie before they left for events, her fingers brushing the shirt collar for a few seconds longer than necessary. They were crumbs, tiny pieces of something that could be considered care, and Yuna hated how much that mattered to her. It was on a Tuesday night, after a particularly tense dinner with Russian investors, that something broke. They returned home in silence. Minho was visibly irritated. A deal had gone wrong. Someone had lied, and he needed to fix it before it became a bigger problem. They went up to the room. Yuna went straight to the bathroom, took off the navy blue dress, washed her face, tried to remove the weight of the day from her shoulders. When she came out, Minho was standing on the balcony, his back to her, looking at the lights of Seoul below, still in his dress shirt but the first button unbuttoned, sleeves rolled up. There was something different in his posture. Tiredness, vulnerability, perhaps. Yuna should have gone straight to bed, should have pretended she didn't see, but instead she walked to the balcony. She stood beside him in silence, looking at the same view. You don't need to be here, Minho said without looking at her. I know. Then why are you? Yuna didn't have a good answer. So she told the truth. Because you seem human today. I'm not used to that. He slowly turned his head, his dark eyes meeting hers. You think I'm not human on other days? I think you work very hard not to be. Silence. The cold night breeze brought the smell of approaching rain. Yuna crossed her arms, feeling a chill. And then, without warning, Minho took the blazer that was thrown on the balcony chair and placed it over her shoulders. The gesture was so unexpected, so kind, that Yuna was completely still. You're going to catch a cold, he said, his voice low. Why do you care? The question came out rawer than she intended, but it was legitimate. It was the question she had been keeping for weeks. Minho didn't answer immediately. He just stood there, so close she could feel the warmth of his body, and looked at her with an intensity that made her heart race. I don't know, he finally said, and there was something almost lost in his voice. I shouldn't, but I care. The world seemed to stop. Yuna knew she should step back. She knew that this, whatever it was dangerous. It was a deviation from the rules. It was exactly the kind of thing that turned contracts into complications. But she didn't move. This wasn't in the agreement, she whispered. I know. So what do we do? Minho took a step toward her. Just one. But it was enough to eliminate any space between them. I don't know, Yuna. For the first time in 10 years. I don't know. And then he did something that turned her world upside down. He touched her face, slowly, like someone holding something fragile, and tilted his head. Yuna could feel his breath mixed with hers. She could see every detail of his dark eyes, so close now that there was no escape. She should push him away. She should remember that this was madness. But instead she closed her eyes, and the kiss happened. It wasn't violent. It wasn't desperate. It was slow, hesitant, as if both were testing unknown territory. As if they were breaking a rule so fundamental that there was no going back. When they separated, neither spoke. Minho stepped back, ran his hand through his hair, and turned his back. That was a mistake, he said, his voice rough. Yuna felt something break in her chest. Was it? It has to be. Why? He turned, and there was a storm in his eyes. Because the moment this becomes real, Yuna, you become my greatest weakness. And weaknesses are killed in this world. Do you understand? Shmina understood. God, she understood perfectly. But understanding didn't make it less devastating, so what was this? A moment of weakness? A lapse? It was. I don't know what it was. You never know. Her voice rose, frustration finally exploding. You never know anything when it comes to me. Am I a wife? Am I a contract? Am I a vulnerability? Am I... What, Minho? What am I to you? He was silent, and that silence hurt more than any answer. Yuna took the blazer off her shoulders, threw it on the chair, and walked back inside the room. She lay on the bed, with her back to where he was, and when he finally came in and lay on the other side, the abyss of 3 palms between them seemed bigger than ever. Neither of them slept that night. Yuna lay with her eyes open in the dark, trying to understand how she had let this happen. How she had let Kang Minho, the man who had bought her, humiliated her, turned her into property, get so close as to break something inside her. And Minho lay, looking at the ceiling, knowing he had crossed a dangerous line because he wasn't lying when he said he cared. And that in a world where emotions were weapons and vulnerabilities were targets, was the most dangerous thing that could have happened. In the following 2 weeks, they avoided each other as much as possible. Minimal conversations, averted gazes, a careful dance of 2 people trying to pretend that kiss had never happened. But it happened. And the more they tried to ignore it, the more the tension grew, like a rope being slowly stretched, about to break. It was during lunch in the garden, where Yuna was alone with a book she couldn't read, that Minho appeared. He sat beside her without asking permission. They remained in silence for a few minutes. I can't offer you what you deserve, he finally said. I never asked for anything, I know. And that drives me crazy. He turned to her. Because everyone in my life wants something. Power, money, status. But you? You just want to be treated like a human. And somehow that's the most expensive thing anyone has ever asked me. Yuna felt tears threatening, but she held them back. So what do we do, Minho? Continue like this, pretending we don't feel what we feel? I don't know if I have a choice. Everyone has a choice. You told me that yourself. He smiled without humor. You throw my own words back at me now? I learned from the best. And for the first time in 2 weeks, he laughed. A short laugh almost. Painful, but real. Then he took her hand, intertwined their fingers. This is going to blow up in our faces, he said. I know, and it's going to hurt. I know, and you still want it. Yuna looked at their intertwined fingers, at his hand holding hers as if it were the only real thing in a world of lies. I don't want it, I need it. And that's the worst part, Minho nodded, as if he finally understood. And it was exactly there that everything exploded. The explosion didn't come from where they expected. It came from within. It was on a Friday night. Minho had a crucial meeting with Japanese investors that could define Empire Holdings' expansion into the Asian market. Yuna was supposed to go with him, as always now, but at the last minute he changed his mind. Stay home today, he said while adjusting his tie in the mirror. Why, this meeting is going to be tense. I don't want you there. You've never cared about that before. Minho stopped, his hand still on his tie, and looked at her through the reflection. Before was different. Different how? Before you were just a piece. Now. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Yuna felt something tighten in her chest. It wasn't anger. It was fear. What aren't you telling me? Nothing you need to worry about, Minho. I'll be back in a few hours. Don't leave the house. He turned, kissed her forehead, a gesture that had become common in recent weeks, and left. Yuna stood there in the empty room, with that horrible feeling that something was terribly wrong. She spent the first hour trying to distract herself. She read, she watched something on TV, she tried to have dinner, but the food tasted like paper in her mouth. That's when her phone rang, unknown number. She hesitated, but answered. Mrs. Kang? The voice was male, unfamiliar. Who is this? Someone who cares about your well-being. Your husband is at this moment meeting with the Japanese at the Shilla Hotel. But there's something you need to know. He's not alone. Yuna's blood froze. What are you talking about? There's a woman with him. Someone from his past, someone who, let's say, has always been there, even after you got married. You're lying. Room 47, Ariake Restaurant. Go and see with your own eyes. Or continue living in the illusion that you mean something to him. The call dropped. Yuna stood there trembling, the phone slipping from her hand. She shouldn't believe it. It was obviously a trap. It was. Exactly the kind of tactic people like Huang would use to separate them. But doubt was a poison that spreads quickly. What if it was true? What if everything, the touches, the kisses, the almost spoken words, was just Minho being strategic? Keeping her close, controlled, while he lived his real life elsewhere? Yuna grabbed her cell phone, called the driver before she could change her mind. I need to go to the Shilla Hotel. Now. When she arrived at the Ariake Restaurant, her heart was beating. So hard she could hear it in her ears. The security guards tried to stop her at the entrance, but she simply walked past them with an authority she didn't even know she possessed. Room 47. They took her. And when the door opened, Yuna's world collapsed. Minho was there, in a suit, as always. But beside him, so close their shoulders almost touched, was a woman. She was beautiful, elegant. She was in her early 30s, sophisticated black dress, hair pulled back in a perfect bun, in the way. She looked at Minho with an intimacy that only comes from years of history, made Yuna's stomach turn. Minho raised his eyes and saw her standing at the door, and for the first time since she had known him, she saw something that looked like guilt. Yuna. Who is she? Silence. The woman turned, assessed Yuna from head to toe with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. So this is the famous wife. Minho, you didn't tell me she was so young. Leave, Minho said to the woman, his voice cutting. Darling, we haven't finished. I said leave. The woman sighed theatrically. grabbed her designer bag, and as she passed Yuna, she stopped and whispered loud enough for Minho to hear, "Good luck competing with ghosts," and she left. Yuna stood there, trembling with anger, with pain, with something she couldn't name. Exclaimed, "It's not what you're thinking. You don't even know what I'm thinking. Who is she?" A long silence. "Her name is Leah Sujin. She was someone important. Before you? Before? She just left here like you belong to her. Because she thinks she does. But she's wrong. Why didn't you tell me about her?" "Because it didn't matter." "It does matter." Yuna's voice echoed through the empty room. "It matters because I'm here, destroying the person I was, drowning in your world, feeling things I shouldn't feel for a man who bought me, and you have someone hidden who looks at you like you're the center of her universe. She means nothing. Then why? Were you with her? Because she has information about Huang. Because she was involved with his group and can help me protect you." Yuna stopped. "What?" Minho ran his hand over his face, tired. "Sujin worked for the rival group for years. She knows their plans. I called her here because I need to know exactly what they're planning against you, and you couldn't tell me this? I was trying to protect you. By lying to me? By keeping you away from things you don't need to know? But I do. Need to," her voice broke. "Because I'm not just a contract anymore, Minho. You said so yourself. So stop treating me like I'm a child who needs to be protected, and start treating me like what? Like someone you love." The silence that followed was deafening. Yuna brought her hand to her mouth, shocked by her own words. Minho was completely still. "I didn't say that," she whispered. I didn't mean to say that, but she had. And now it was there, hanging in the air, between them like an involuntary confession. "Yuna, forget it, forget I said it." She turned to leave. But Minho was faster. He grabbed her arm, turned her back. "No, you don't get to throw that out there and run away. Let me go. You think I love you? I don't know anything when it comes to you. One day you're ice, the next you kiss me, the next you're with another woman discussing my safety without telling me. I can't stand trying to decipher you anymore. Then I'll simplify it for you." And he pulled her close, held her face with both hands, and looked into her eyes with an intensity that cut off any words she could say. "Yes, I love you. And that's the worst thing that could have happened, because now I have a giant target painted on your back. Because now every enemy I have knows exactly where to attack me. Because now, for the first time in 10 years, I have something to lose." Tears streamed down Yuna's face. "And I hate it," he continued, his voice breaking. "I hate that you have this power over me. I hate that I wake up thinking about whether you're safe. I hate that I look at you and see the only good thing I have in this shitty life, Minho. But more than anything, I hate that I put you in this position, that I bought you as if you were property, and now, when I finally feel something real, I have no right to ask you to feel the same." Yuna couldn't see through the tears anymore. "You're an idiot. I know, you should have told me. About her, I know. And you never hide anything from me again. Never, never again." And then she kissed him, not like the first time, hesitant and scared, but like someone who had just realized she was exactly where she should be, even if it was the most dangerous place in the world. When they separated, Minho rested his forehead on hers. "After this, nothing went back to how it was before." "I know. Are you sure?" Yuna held his face. "I've never been sure of anything in my life, but this I'm sure of." And in that moment, in the ruins of a marriage that had started as a transaction and become something completely different, Yuna and Minho became something new, something forbidden, something real, and something their world would never forgive. The truth about what happened that night at the Shilla Hotel leaked in less than 48 hours. Not the real details, the confession, the kiss, Sujin's revelation, but a distorted version, manipulated, designed to destroy. The headlines appeared first on Gangnam gossip blogs, then on financial news sites, and finally on social media. Chong Min-ho's wife causes scandal at luxury restaurant, jealousy or calculation. The true face of Mesconshong Empire in crisis. Fake marriage crumbles. Yuna read everything on her iPad while having coffee on Saturday morning. Every word was like a punch to the stomach. They said she had made a scene, that she had yelled at Minho in public, that she was unstable, jealous, a gold digger who was losing control of her husband. There were even photos taken by someone who was at the restaurant or planted there purposely. Yuna standing at the door of the private room, her face marked by tears, Minho holding her arm. Angles that made it look like a sordid domestic fight. "Don't read that," Minho said, taking the iPad from her hand. "How did you know I was? Because I read it first." He looked tired, more than tired. He looked like someone carrying the weight of a war he was starting to lose. "They're destroying me. They're destroying us. Together." Yuna got up, walked to the huge living room window. Outside, 3 media vans were parked at the mansion gates, cameras pointed, reporters waiting for any movement. Was this Huang? Obviously. "And what do we do?" Minho was silent, and that silence said everything. Because for the first time he didn't have a ready answer. He didn't have a perfect plan. He didn't have total control of the situation. His phone rang. He answered, listened for a few seconds, and hung up with a tense jaw. "The board meeting has been moved up. They want to vote on my continuance as CEO." Yuna felt the floor disappear. "Can they do that?" "They can try. I have enough shares to block it, but—" He hesitated. "Some of the minority shareholders are being pressured. If they join forces, they can remove me. Because of me. Because of us." The difference was small, but significant. Yuna turned to him, her chest tight. "Then, break up with me." Minho looked at her as if she had spoken in another language. "What? Publicly? Say you were right about me from the beginning, that I was unstable, that the marriage was a mistake. Throw me to the wolves and save your empire. Are you crazy? I'm being practical. It's exactly what you would do if I didn't. If you didn't." She couldn't finish. Minho crossed the room in 3 long strides and grabbed her shoulders. "I'm not going to do that. You're going to lose. Everything. Then I lose. But not like this. Minho, listen to what I'm saying, Yuna. I built this empire on top of lies, manipulation, and blood. You think I care if it crumbles? The only thing in this life I can't lose is you." Tears burned her eyes. "That's not fair. None of this is fair. But it's real." And in that moment, Yuna understood the true price of what they had. Love, in their world, wasn't a reward. It was sacrifice. The board meeting happened on Monday. Minho went alone. He refused to let Yuna accompany him, and this time she didn't argue. He didn't need more fuel for the fire. She stayed home, pacing back and forth in the living room like a caged animal, her cell phone in hand, waiting for news. The hours dragged on. Finally, at 6 in the afternoon, he returned. Yuna was on the stairs when she heard the door open. She ran down. One look at his face said everything. "How much time do you have?" she asked, her voice trembling. 3 months. If I don't reverse the